In this video, we're going to install Unreal Engine and take a look at all of the features it has built into it that you can use to make an awesome game. And then we're actually going to make an awesome game. So the first thing you're going to want to do is go to store.epicgames.com/download. And then you can download the Epic Games Launcher for whatever platform you're on. On Windows, you can run the installer and give it the requested permissions, and on Mac, simply drag it into the Applications folder. Once it's installed, go ahead and launch it, and make sure you're on the Unreal Engine tab here in the top left. We're going to want to click on the Library tab, and here you can see all of the stuff you already own, which for you probably won't be anything, but for me, I have all of the assets I've gotten down here at the bottom, my projects here in the middle, and up top, my engine versions. Now, if you don't have an engine version, go ahead and click this plus, and from the drop-down, select the newest option that doesn't say Preview, which for me is 5.4.0. Then click Install on that, agree to the license agreement, you can choose where you'd like to install it, and then confirm the installation. Now, these engine versions are usually 20 to 40 gigabytes, so it's going to take a while to download, and if you want to check on its progress, you can do that with the Downloads button down here on the bottom left, and it'll give you a nice progress bar and even show you what it's doing. But while we wait for that to download, let's check out the rest of the launcher. The News tab all the way on the left shows us stuff about the latest Unreal Engine version, stuff that's being made with Unreal, and even some tips and tricks. Maybe one of my videos will get here someday. The Samples tab shows us some cool projects that are either learning opportunities or showcase the extremes of what you can do with Unreal Engine. If you have space for them, I definitely recommend you check them out. Then we have the Marketplace, which is where you can buy assets if you have money to burn, or you can select the Free tab and find tons of assets that are free for you to use with Unreal Engine, and you never have to worry about any copyrights. You can also hover over this Free tab here and select Free for the month, which is where every month they make 5 paid assets free, so make sure to get those while they last. The Library tab, as we've already seen, is where all of the stuff we actually own goes. So at the bottom we have any assets we've gotten from the asset store, we have any projects we've created on this machine, and we have the engine versions that we've already installed or are currently installing. The last 2 tabs are a couple of other cool free software things that you can use with Unreal, but we're not going to cover those in this video. And once we've installed our version of Unreal Engine, we can go ahead and hit launch. This is the Unreal Project browser, where we can see all of the recent projects that we've opened, and we can create a new project from any of these 5 categories. Now we're interested in making games, so let's select the games category, and let's go ahead and use the first person template. Now we want to select a blueprint because we're going to be doing visual scripting and not C++ for this project. We're going to be targeting desktop, and why not go for maximum quality. We can also select where we're going to put our project, and we can name it whatever we want. So I'm going to name mine, very creatively, Tutorial Project. Once our project is created, it'll open up in Unreal Engine, and it'll look something like this. Now, there's a lot of stuff going on here, but don't worry, we're going to go through it all step by step, and I'll show you how to make your very first game. So the main section here that grabs our attention immediately is the viewport, which shows the actual game that we're working on. Since we selected the first-person template, we already have a simple level that shows off the main features of the first-person character. So to run this game, we can click the green play button right here or use the Option P shortcut. And we already have this first-person character that we can walk around with, maybe bump into these little cubes, or pick up this gun and start shooting around these little yellow balls that'll interact with the level. All of this functionality was added because we selected the first-person template when we were creating our project. Now currently we can only look around and we can't use our mouse to select things outside of the viewport. So if we press Shift F1, then we'll get our mouse cursor back and we can select things outside of the game world. To stop the game, we can click this red stop button here, or just hit the escape key. Now, next to the play and stop buttons, we have this little drop down that will allow us to change how the game is played. So let's say we want to spawn the player at the current camera location, instead of the default player start, which is this little icon right here. That's where the player usually spawns. Now, if we run the game again, we'll spawn where this camera is, where we're currently looking out of into the world. Also, instead of playing in the selected viewport, we could go to our dropdown and we could say, create a new editor window for me to play in. And now we're playing in a new window and we spawned where the camera is instead of where we usually spawn over there in the left corner. So we can press escape to leave the play mode. Now to navigate around the scene, what you want to do is you want to right click and then you can move your mouse around to look around at the world. And you can also use W, A, S, and D to move yourself around in the world. So you hold right click and then you can look around and move around just like a standard video game character in first person. And we can also use Q and E to raise and lower ourselves. It's pretty smooth. And if you don't like the camera's speed, then while you're right clicking, you can use the scroll wheel to adjust the speed. Speed is shown up here in the top right corner. You can also click on that and adjust the speed manually yourself if you desire. Also, if we select an object and press F, then it'll focus on that object. So however we're rotated, it'll jump to us looking at that object from that rotation. So if I wanted to see the back of this wall, I could click on it, turn away from it, and then press F, and now we're seeing the back of that wall. Now in the top left, we have a drop down that allows us to select the view. So instead of perspective, which is the normal mode, we could, for example, look at it from the right of the scene, or we could look at it from the top of the scene. Now notice that when we selected top view, it changed the rendering mode to wireframe, but we can put it back to lit by clicking on wireframe and selecting lit, which is the default rendering mode. Alright, now if we go back to perspective, and you can use Option G as a shortcut for this, there are also lots of other rendering modes that we can use. For example, we could go to Optimization View Modes and select Shader Complexity. For example, this view is telling us that the cubes and the gun have a slightly more complex shader than these gray objects around the level, which in turn have a slightly more complex shader than the sky behind them. But all of them are in the green, so we have no need to worry, and we can press Option 4 to go back to the regular rendering mode, the lit rendering mode. Now the fourth menu up here is the Show menu, and this allows us to turn off different aspects of the level just in the editor. So if the atmosphere was getting in my way, I could turn off the atmosphere, and now we just have everything else. Now this is still here in play mode because we didn't delete it. We're just hiding it in the editor to make it more convenient for us. But obviously we don't want that, so let's just hit Use Defaults to reset everything back to normal. Now this last option here is the scalability settings, and you might not see it if you don't have it on medium or low settings. So what this allows us to do, and you can do the same thing by going to Settings all the way in the top right, and then selecting engine scalability settings, is you can change the quality of everything in the viewport. So you can see if I set it on low, we have absolutely no shadows. And this will not change anything in the actual game. So for me, if I had it on high or whatever I usually have it on, it would lag out because I'm currently running recording software. So I want to set it on medium or low so that I can get a decent frame rate for editing. This doesn't change the finished game, it just makes it more playable for me while I'm editing it. Now, if we take a look at this top toolbar here, these two aren't important, but this drop down here is pretty important. It allows us to select between different working modes. So right now we're in the selection mode, which is the main working mode that we'll use, but we could also select the landscape mode to create a big, awesome landscape, which we'll do later on, or the foliage, modeling, fracturing, all these different modes. And each of these different modes turns the viewport into a workspace for that task. So the animation mode kind of turns this into an animation workspace. Now, we're going to take a look at most of these other modes later on, but for now, let's go back to the selection mode and just keep in mind that those are there. So now that we can move around and we understand a couple things, how do we actually edit the scene? Well, let's click on something and you can see we're given these arrows, which we can use to move the object around. Now, this isn't the only thing we can do. If we take a look at this little bar here, more to the right, we can see there's 4 different things we can do, which we can switch between by clicking on them up here, or we can use the shortcuts Q for selection mode, W for arrows, E for rotation, and R for scale. And with each of these little control handles, we can change which operation we're doing, and we can do whatever we want to these objects. Now, for each of these modes, we can also turn on snapping. So the 3 snapping sections are these 3 sections here, and each of them has a toggle for turning on or off snapping, and a little drop down so we can select what increment we'd like to snap in. So I'd like to move my objects by, let's say, 50s, and now you can see there's a little more of a snap because we're only moving it every 50. We can't move it every 10 anymore. And we can do the same thing for rotation. So if we press E to go into rotation mode, currently we're rotating by 10s, but maybe we only want to rotate by 90s. There we go. Now we can only rotate by 90s, and it's completely invisible because obviously the cube looks exactly the same at every 90-degree rotation. And of course, it's the same for scale as well. One more cool trick we can do is if we press W to go back into movement mode, if we hold down Option, we can duplicate our object, and suddenly we'll be dragging around a whole new object. So just hold down Option, and then we can go ahead and bring out as many of these as we want. But what if we want an object that isn't already in the level? Well, there's 2 ways to do this. The first one is this Add Actors dropdown right here next to the Modes button that we talked about before. This one allows you to select from all of these different options. Let's say we want a cylinder, we can add that. Let's say we want a light, maybe a point light. Well, we can add that too. Now we have a little light in our scene. But that's not all. Down at the bottom, we have all of these simple objects, and you can see it gives us some recently placed options as well. But up top here, we also have this Quixel Bridge option. And what this does is it opens up this little browser that will allow us to add anything we want from these 14,000 high-quality assets to our scene just by dragging and dropping. So if I search up, let's say, a rock, then I can grab one of these rocks, and I can drag it into the scene. Let's press F to focus on it, and you can see real time, it's downloading it and adding it to our scene. Okay, so that's one of the ways to add assets to our scene, is that little drop down right here. But the other way is if we press Control and Space at the same time, we'll get the Content Browser, which shows us the files in our project, just like a file browser. We can navigate through these folders to find something we like. Maybe we want another projectile, and add it to the scene just by dragging and dropping. Now this Megascans folder here is what was created when we added that 3D rock to our scene, and we can see it's right here. We can add another one if we want. Now we created this project with the first-person shooter template, but if we wanted to add any of the other templates, we could right-click, go to Add Feature or Content Pack, and there we go, all of the other templates, third person, top down, everything else that we could possibly want. Also, all the way on the right, we have the content tab, and we could add the starter content, which is what that checkbox when we were creating our project would have added. And as you can see, it's just a few different materials and a couple of objects that could be fun for us to get started with. But I don't want to add anything, so I'm just going to cancel out of that. Now, we should probably save our scene at some point using Command or Control S. And right now, we've only edited one file, our little level here, so that's enough. But if we had edited multiple files, then we could save them all by doing Command or Control Shift S. And that would save all of the edited files across the whole project. If you don't know whether you've saved your files recently, and you don't feel like hitting Command S just to be sure, you can look down here in the bottom right corner, and you can see whether all of your files are saved, or whether some of them maybe aren't. Unreal will also autosave after every 30 seconds or something like that. Now, this viewport can get quite full once we add a lot of stuff, so we can use the outliner here in the top right to organize our materials. And as you can see, we can use all of these folders to sort out where our stuff is going to be. This search bar is also very helpful if we wanted to find, let's say, our projectile that we just added to the scene. We could click on it and then press F to go ahead and frame it, and now we have it at the center of our viewport. The drop down on the left here also allows us to search based on the type of thing that we're looking for. So for example, if we just wanted lights, we could click on the lights option here, remove our search of course, and we would see just the lights that we have in the scene. Right below that, we have the details panel, and this will allow us to adjust all of the different features of the object. Now, this includes the location, rotation, and scale that we were editing with our little handles, but it also includes other aspects that are unique to each type of object. For example, if we go ahead and press F to look at our directional light, which is adding most of the light to the scene, we can actually change the light color by clicking on this color and setting it to, let's say, red. Now, obviously our scene looks much better this way, but we probably don't want to leave it like this, so let's Command Z to undo that. Okay, so now we have an idea of how to use Unreal Engine. Let's go ahead and use that knowledge to create an environment for our game in this video right here.